Welcome back to the Quiet Light Podcast. This is Pat Yates sitting in for Joe Valley. Today we have Ben Fisher, really fascinating conversation. Ben is with Hey.Rodeo is the website, but the company is called Rodeo, and they work really hard to increase your subscribe and stay. So just a little information about Ben. Ben's journey began as a young kid selling strawberries door to door in Maine. And if you could imagine a kid walking up with just strawberries, how do you not have blueberries and a whole complement? I'm not even sure. I should have asked him about that during the podcast. But then he used the profits to be able to do computer programming books and learn about coding when he was a teenager. He co-founded CartHook, a platform that optimized the checkout process for D2C e-commerce brands on Shopify and enabled them to offer post-purchase upsells. Post-purchase upsells created a new revenue channel for brands, resulting in an additional $250 million in revenue, and it was acquired in 2022. Today, Ben runs Rodeo, a platform for eight-figure D2C brands that use subscription models to maximize customer retention and LTV. This is a fascinating conversation, and if you're out there working on your subscription model, subscribe and save, whatever anyone's going to call it, then this is the kind of podcast you really need to listen to, and I would reach out to Ben at Hey.Radio. So let's get right to Ben. I'm excited about this conversation today. And Ben, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Man, I'm so excited to get into this today. It's funny because we have so many entrepreneurs, and especially as an advisor, we get so many questions about ways to expand their business. We don't just get people coming in looking to sell. They want to understand how to improve and get in a position. So I'm really excited to talk about the business today. And I'd love for you to introduce Rodeo and tell us basically the 30,000 foot view of what you do, the broadest thing. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, I'd love to hear your background. Sure. And then go into the business itself.
Sure. So going back to 1985, sorry, bad joke.
No, that's okay. I can do that. I'm not old. We can do that.
No, it is fine. But I did start programming, and I guess this is a part of like my I'll say like my hero's journey, and just my sort of where I am and how I got here was I started programming at like an absurdly young age, like 5th grade. I grew up on a tree farm in Maine. I'm an only child. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. And so I got really interested in computers and like learning how to code. And I used to sell strawberries to buy computer books. And so, fast forward, I'm still doing more or less what I was doing in 5th grade. Right. Which I guess is both a blessing as well as some days a curse. But I would say is like a lot of what I've been interested in the last 10 years is I've really focused on building tools and specifically tools that help e-commerce entrepreneurs make more money. I'm sure like for anyone who's built a business out there, you have a lot of really interesting and cool ideas. For me, one of the challenges was like, what's the revenue model? What's the business model? And so after I would say like several cool projects that like I never figured out the business, I decided to focus specifically on e-commerce. Because I was like, if I can help other people make more money, then it becomes a win-win because naturally there's a business model there. And so that's what I've been focused on for the last 9 years. And specifically on the Shopify ecosystem. So I don't know for how many of y'all are listening, how long you've been in e-commerce, but I would say now Shopify is known as the dominant platform for certainly it was early on, it was perceived as only for small merchants. Over the last like 4 or 5 years, they've really, and maybe even longer than that, 5 years or so, they've accelerated and focused on like upper mid-market to enterprise, which is the space that, the Magentos and the big commerces used to play. With that, and I'd say as the evolution of the Shopify ecosystem, a lot of things have changed in e-commerce as well. And one of those big things is the different tools and strategies people have to sell. It used to be with e-commerce, you could sell your product and then you had to sell a product again, hopefully to the same person like a few months later. But now about 10 years ago, we had sort of like this box of the month model that came out where you could actually subscribe to products. And as of this year, about 70% of brands on Shopify offer some sort of subscription product. And this is specifically direct to consumer e-commerce brands on Shopify. That's the last stat that I had seen. And so we went from a place where offering a subscription to a product was somewhat novel. And like you might subscribe to like a couple things, but now, an enormous number of brands are all asking you to subscribe. And, the problem there is in part that if you had a digital subscription, whether or not you watch Hulu or Netflix this month, you might have wasted $5. That's not a huge deal. You don't like wasting money, but when you're subscribing to physical products, specifically like food and beverage brands, it really is actually like it's painful to receive a package in the mail for something that you actually don't need more of.
Sure.
I actually have my freezer is currently full of paper towels because I had a shipment show up of like a family size of paper towels and I wasn't ready for more. And so what you've seen over the last couple of years is that as this business model has exploded and then everyone's offering subscriptions, the reality of subscriptions is that they're not always convenient. And as more and more brands are kind of pushing subscriptions as a model, it actually becomes a broken and bad experience for more and more people. Sure. And so, what I have focused on is specifically what are tools to help other brands or to help brands still generate recurring revenue, but still provide a great consumer experience. Because at the end of the day, the goal for any brand is you want repeat purchases from customers, right? It's to have as many people to have satisfied customers and get them buying from you on a recurring or regular cadence, whatever that mechanism is. And subscriptions up till now have really been that mechanism that people perceived as recurring because it automatically renews unless the person cancels.
Sure.
So I don't know how far into the weeds you want to go into exactly how what our product does, but what I was going back to that analogy or that anecdote rather of my paper towel example is that happens to people all the time, especially like if it's a food and beverage brand, unless you're buying a medication where the exact dosage you're taking every day, like one aspirin or something, 30 days of a product isn't going to last necessarily 30 days. And that issue becomes compounded when brands aren't necessarily matching their packaging to the subscription cadence, because it's almost it's sort of funny that every single brand basically offers the same subscription plans, like every 30, 60, 90 days. Are you telling me that all their packaging is really thought out, that this is exactly 30, 60, 90 days of product?
That's a very, very good point.
And especially like in a post-COVID, now that people are traveling and stuff, like our consumption patterns aren't even consistent. Like people are out of town and whatnot. And so at the end of the day, and this has been our thesis, that subscriptions are great for certain types of products and for certain people, right? Like if you look at any sort of customer base, the numbers I generally see are about let's say 15% of a brand's customers will be like subscribers. And, let's say like half of those, I won't say half of those, let's say in a percentage of those will be like loyal subscribers. But you have this enormous larger pool of customers who they buy repeatedly. Like if you were to analyze your order history, you probably do see people who buy on some somewhat frequent basis, but they're not subscribers. Yeah. And there is a way to enable those folks to essentially be able to buy from you frequently without having to remember themselves. Because ultimately, the promise of subscription is this idea of set it and forget it. The problem is the reality when you're dealing with physical products is it rarely works out that you get as much as you need when you need it.
That's really an incredible point, because I'm searching in my mind, just thinking of things that I've had on Subscriber Saver, my wife has, and then you end up with two months of it and you say, well, I got to shut it off. And then you basically don't go back to it unless you remember it. So it's a really interesting point. So let me ask this. So again, we're talking with Ben Fisher with Rodeo, and we're learning how to really take this subscribe and say, make it better. So tell me an example of what kind of businesses you work with. Maybe give one good example of someone that's like a perfect case study. It doesn't have to be the person. It could be an item if you want to say, because I'm curious who the wheelhouse customers are here.
Yeah. So we focus specifically on CPG, so food and beverage, health and wellness, and beauty and cosmetics. So specifically products that have some sort of unpredictability to how often you'll go through them. A great example of, I was going to say, so for example, with wipes, one of the companies we work with, Biome, they sell like eco-friendly wipes. It's an alternative to like the caustic Lysol spray. Like this is
Sure.
actually like a beautifully designed product that you actually want to have outside in your home. But you're not going to consistently use the same number of wipes every month or every week, right? But Byam still wants to make it super easy for someone to be able to buy, right? To buy and for Byam to be top of mind when that person is ready or getting close to running out, so that you don't run out and then go to like the local store and buy whatever wipes that they have available, right? Sure. And so Byam's actually like a great example of a business where a customer isn't necessarily always going to want to subscribe by default, because they're like, well, I don't necessarily know. So one of the things about subscribing is you then have to pay attention and self-monitor and go like, well, do I need to skip this month? Like there's an element of anxiety that can happen. A lot of people are like, I'm forgetful. So I'll forget that I have to have this subscription. And then there are certain people who's like, I don't care if I have a few extra wipes or a few, like, I just want them on hand. So subscription is subscribe and save is perfect for that type of consumer. But there's a lot of us where it's like, I know I want it. I just want it to be easy to buy it when I need it. And so what we developed is what we call an on-demand experience, where so you can have basically customers will get a smart reminder that asks them if they're ready for more, and their card is stored on file. So that's the important piece here. Is we're able to store the person's card on file and then check in with them, let's say after 30 days, and say, hey, you've been using Byam, like basically, do you have another week left? Like, do you think you'll need more in like 30 days or in like 1 week? And the person can either snooze the reminder or essentially click a button and rebuy what they had before.
So you try to get ahead of the timing. Let's say you talked earlier about how regimented some people could be, 30, 60, 90. That's how they do their subscribe and save. So this is meant to be not necessarily the actual in your face purchase. It's meant to be a reminder of the need to purchase, and then they help schedule it out instead. Am I saying that right as far as how the flow would go?
Yeah. So you could even think of it as it's with a typical subscription, it will automatically renew on its own after, let's say, 30 days. What we do and we still support that, right? We do our technology, our platform supports a traditional subscription, but our on-demand model is just another option that brands can offer customers who don't want to subscribe. And what it does is they say, hey, all right, you don't want to subscribe. So just put your card on file and we'll check in with you on a regular interval based off of how quickly we basically are able to see you like consuming the product. And an order will not be placed unless the customer's like, yep, I'm ready. And so what ends up happening is you get a lot of people who would typically just be buying in response to email marketing, or if they think about it, you're basically able to eliminate 95% of the checkout friction by, first off, having their card on file. And the second piece is they have opted into getting reminders from you, checking in to see how, essentially how quickly they're consuming the product and if they're ready for more.
Is it a pseudo way of being able to set when you want that refill and just not making it so structured? Is it as simple as thinking that, and people feel as if they have more control over that refill than they do with a regimented time range?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And I mean, that's like a good way to describe it. Like I almost think of it as like a pharmacy. A pharmacy will check in and say, do you need a refill? They won't just necessarily refill your prescription. And so it's what we call, it's a middle road where we really have two options today as consumers. You can buy whenever you think of it and like remember it, or you can buy it and automatically get it every single month. And the reality is that like life is more nuanced than that. And so like brands and entrepreneurs should be able to offer additional sort of intermediate options. And so this on demand is like a middle ground between it's subscription, like it's still that Pavlovian like reminder, hoping, kind of encouraging someone to buy like every 30, 60, 90 days, whatever the time frame is for them, but they're actually getting more people to opt into it because it's not so prescriptive and it's not the same sort of, we'll call it like limiting model that people have experienced now that more and more people have had bad experiences with subscriptions.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So let's say, for instance, that I'm selling supplements. Let's just make it up. And I have these on Shopify and I want to go out and I want to use your services. And I come in today and I say, Ben, let's go. What is the first step, and what typically do the clients need to be able to get onboarded and work with you? I mean, I'm sure there's steps to get it going, to have that working on your system. So tell a little bit about that.
Yeah. So one of the great things about Shopify is, as long as you're on Shopify, like most apps in the Shopify ecosystem, you can install with a click. So the initial installation process it's easy out of the box. Like, you literally just go into the app store, you click the install button, it's installed. There are some then configurations that you do. What we do is when you're onboarded working with Rodeo, we guide you through the different steps. It's straightforward, but it's questions we have to ask around, like, do you want different shipping? Like, are you offering free shipping for people who subscribe, as opposed to maybe it's not free if they don't subscribe? Like, what are some of the different perks that you want to incorporate into your subscription program in the first place? So, for example, you can have products that are only available to subscribers. We have one brand that we've worked with that they would collaborate with like different coffee makers every couple months. And so they had coffee that you could only buy if you had an active subscription. And that was a way to layer in value to the subscription beyond just, hey, here's more stuff. Like, they made it feel like a perk just to be a subscriber, like you're getting access.
Yeah. Now let me ask this. I know that when people come in, there's some, there's systems that work a little differently inside Shopify, the way they do this. I know that you have a lot of different services that you offer. I mean, maybe tell me a little bit about that, because I noticed that you help with branding design, maybe a little bit, and how it's marketed. I mean, when they come in and they're wanting to work with your company, how do they actually get it to market? Because I'm envisioning installing the app, but needing some work after in design or the way that it workflows. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, so we don't do anything on the actual like design development side. We are on the software side. What we do is we do provide, because of our experience, and like my partner, he's also an engineer, and we both of us have been working in the space for so long. Part of the reason we started Rodeo was we wanted to work with other experienced entrepreneurs and provide sort of our, like, what we're good at, which is the technology side and just a lot of pattern matching and having worked with a lot of brands over the last 10 years. And so oftentimes what will happen is there will be a bit of a collaborative piece where an entrepreneur who has an e-commerce brand will be like, I'm thinking about maybe, like, they're looking for advice or feedback around even what they're offering as a subscription, or maybe they want to package it more as a membership as opposed to a subscription to individual products. So we do help with that, but we don't do any actual design development.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So what about timing? I mean, do customers come in and work with you long-term, continuing to do this? Is it usually an onboarding process? Tell me a little bit about, start to finish, the kind of timing it takes to get traction with something like this.
So we typically work with brands that already have at least a couple $1 million a year in revenue. Like, we work with some brands that do tens of millions, we've worked with some brands that do hundreds. And so we don't work with brands typically that are just starting out. And the reason behind that is we can be most helpful in serving brands that already have revenue, because early on, what you'll find is a lot of early stage e-commerce brands are just, they're trying to figure out whether or not they have a business. They're trying to figure out how to grow it. Where our experience is really helpful is we've scaled so many companies that if you're a brand that's scaling, we're disproportionately valuable to you, because the questions that you have are probably things around like the technologies you're using, like what's the right way to do this to avoid issues around like on the operations side of your business around fulfillment. And those problems are magnified for companies that are doing north of $10 million. And so just by and large of who can we be most helpful to, like that's our sweet spot, is focusing specifically with brands who already have product market fit. And then the reason they work with us is to help them accelerate their growth. And a lot of the brands we work with, actually every single brand we've worked with, they already had an existing subscription program. So none of them were starting from scratch.
Right. See, that's an interesting point, because I'm thinking about the people that did it wrong first. Let's say that they had 15,000 subscribers a year and a half, 2 years ago. Now they have 8,000. Let's say that they understand that they can do this better, but is there an opportunity to recapture those 7 because they have a better system? If you have any
for sure
data around how people can actually improve what they've already messed up?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what's interesting is when you look at like why, obviously the answer is it depends. But if it doesn't, the example doesn't even have to be as dramatic as that. It could be someone, it could be a business that hasn't really grown, because with subscriptions, like basically the killer for subscriptions is churn. It's people canceling. And
Right.
so one of the first things that we do when a brand onboards with us is we look at all their customer um, cancellation reasons. And the number one reason that consumers cancel subscriptions is they have too much product. Price is the other reason. It's either price or it's too much product. And the insane thing about too much product is it goes back to the fact that this auto delivery mechanism of subscriptions, while so powerful, is actively leading like customers who like your product to cancel because they're getting too much of it. And so for folks like that, what we do is we can actually identify all of your customers who canceled for that particular reason, essentially create a segment of them, and then work with you to get them to do, like, for example, the on-demand program where, hey, we know last time you were getting too much product. Now we have a way to enable you to be in like 100% control. And it's still, the benefit is that you're still getting reminded. You're not having to remember yourself. And your card's on file. We know your preferences because you've purchased before. So we're able to pre-build a cart every month based off of what you've previously purchased. But now you can avoid that problem of getting too much product because you weren't ready for it. Does that
That's
make
really
sense?
interesting. Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, it's really fascinating. I mean, I in the business, in my e-com business, I don't do any of the subscribe and save. It's really not that kind of product, but it's really interesting because it made mention as I was reading up on this a little bit that you may have an opportunity to even expand what that customer's buying from that same vendor, subscribe and
100%.
save, maybe because they're able to put other things there. Tell me a little bit about how that can happen. I mean, cross promotion where you end up reselling someone that's already on a subscribe. It's like selling the people you're already dealing with.
It's funny. Like that's a great. So one of the things that we developed was, well, let's go to the insight. The insight is that the highest opened email that a brand sends is the upcoming order reminder email, which brands hate sending. That we'll say like some brands hate sending it because they hate reminding people they have a subscription, because that leads to someone realizing I don't need more product. I'd argue, well, that's literally the cost of doing business. Is you don't, like, if you're building a great business, you want people who need your product to have your product, not getting force fed, and because then they resent you. What's great about that though is, or the fact that email is open so much, it's also a great opportunity for you to almost frame it as that upcoming order email can be framed as a, hey, your order is about to renew. You still have time to add a few more things to that order. And so what we'll do is, like with Rodeo, we have the ability for you to embed complementary products that can be added to your upcoming order with one click. Right. So that becomes a revenue expansion opportunity, not just one where, some people will cancel because that's life. But it can be offset now is by the fact, well, some people are actually increasing their average order value because you have these offers incorporated within that email, and it's only a single click to add it.
Yeah. Maybe talk a little bit about your pricing and how that works. I mean, you don't have to talk specifically because I know this dates it and it could change, but maybe give us an idea if someone comes in, what they expect to be paying for your services.
Sure. So it's largely performance based. We have a flat rate of $5.99 a month. And then it's 1% and 20 cents per subscription order. The way we framed it that way is in part like the $5.99 is because we're more hands-on as a business. Like we want to be hands-on. And so there's just like a cost of us being able to afford to be able to do business with a brand, to be able to give them the amount of time that we want. And like the typical brand that's working with us, like, they're doing a fair amount of volume, and having that sort of performance piece around like the 1%, 20 cents, that matters because it also enables us to continue coming up with creative ways to help them grow their revenue, right? Like if the brand's not making more money, then we're not doing our job and we're not making more money. And so it intended to align incentives.
So obviously one thing you want to make sure people understand is this isn't something you come in and you just run a SaaS program and it cranks it out. You do personal help with these people, understanding the subscribe and save and your business in Rodeo and how to grow that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Because you
Yes.
find a lot of companies that just sort of come in and give you a fix and they say, well, here it's automated. That's how people work. But
Yeah.
giving that direct feedback is really, really amazing. So another question that I had, I mean, do you find that your customers stay long term? Is it something that the improvement is so solid? I'm sure that every case is different, but do you feel like with most of your clients, they've seen that increase and it's something they continue to work with you 12, 18, 24, 36 months down the
Yes.
line?
Yes. I mean, we've been around for about 2 years. So you can't say that we've had anyone for 10 years yet. But because part of this wasn't even technologically possible in Shopify until 2 years ago. So we were one of the first apps to launch that were able to leverage these new APIs that Shopify had created. The way, and this goes back into like the history of like the evolution of Shopify, but for about 7 years, there were two companies that were allowed by Shopify to offer subscription solutions. And that's because Shopify itself couldn't natively support subscriptions. And so they let two companies for 7 years have a duopoly. And they were the only ones who were able to offer a subscription solution. And then 2 years ago, Shopify released sort of like some initial APIs to let other developers also compete.
I'll tell you what really strikes me. Sometimes I look at businesses and I think they do way too much. Like I look at marketing agencies all the time. They'll do 75 things you need inside your business. You really decided to concentrate on one, and one that not a lot of people spend a lot of time on. What I found amazing in this, and maybe you can talk to the listeners a little bit about how it's important to even compartmentalize this, because there may be people out there that understand a little bit about subscribe and save, and maybe the listeners who are doing it think, oh, it's pretty simple. I just put it out there and people subscribe and they keep saving, but they can't avoid the churn. So you're a specialist in this. What are the main hiccups that you see people that don't work with someone before they come into you?
Yeah.
What are they experiencing that you try to fix? Because maybe people sitting there right now saying, I can't get past this in my subscribe and save. And if he says it, I need to work on it. What are those things?
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, a few things. I think part of it is it's especially, as I was saying, like part of what's happened at a macro level is we have so many brands offering subscriptions, regardless of whether or not their product actually makes sense as a subscription. So I think for any entrepreneur, part of it's thinking about, well, does my product on its own make sense as a subscription? And if not, there are still ways for you to offer a subscription product. It can be as a membership where, it's not necessarily about sending them more product every single month. It could be around curation. It could be a digital product, something where someone will pay like $10 a month for, where maybe it's not the full blown product, but what they get instead is they get a discount for buying products on your store. Right. So there's different flavors of subscription revenue. Like if you could think of it as an umbrella, the parent is membership, and membership is like what you experience with like Amazon Prime or Costco, where you pay a membership subscription and it gives you some sort of perks, whether it's like a discount off of some products or 2-day shipping if you're on Amazon. And then you can subscribe to individual products. What I will say, like focusing on the subscription piece, one thing that I've seen brands kind of mess up is doing really heavy, steep discounts. And the reason that can kill your subscription program is it ends up, a lot of people will subscribe simply because of the discount. And in talking to a lot of consumers, and part of what we do again is like we're super nerdy about this. Like, and I'm a consumer. I spend a lot of time looking at and buying stuff and thinking about like, what the experience is like and comparing like brand experiences. I have had conversations with consumers who are like, the discount, I felt like I was being ripped off if I paid full price, even though I only wanted it once. I bought it for the subscription and then I canceled it. Right. So what ends up happening is by focusing on the financial incentive, you're bringing in a lot of people who, they don't actually want to subscribe. And so that is very dangerous when you're doing a very steep discount. So let's say anything over 20%. The amount you discount varies, and like depending on your business, maybe like different businesses can support different margins, but just like all things being equal, like if you're heavily discounting your product, you're probably attracting a lot of people who just don't want to subscribe. It's too enticing then to pay full price. Right. And what that actively does is it doesn't give you a good signal around, well, how many of these people are actually going to stay? It will artificially inflate your churn. And so you have what I'd call you have like an anemic subscription program as soon as you start going down that road. And I think part of the problem there too is focusing so much on price. Like if you look at Amazon Subscribe and Save, you save like 5%. Like Amazon has not framed their subscribe and save as like you get 30% off the product. And I think that goes back to the reason when subscription works, it works because it's convenient. It's a convenient way for a certain type of person to like receive a product. And again, for most of us, it's like we're so busy with life. Like we don't want to be remembering. Like my solution actually before Rodeo was I had a calendar reminder to rebuy products with a link to the product page to buy the product. That was my original solution before Rodeo. Was I did it myself with my calendar. And so like different people want to buy in different ways. And ultimately we all want control over our money, especially with what's happening in the economy, where people are just like, they're looking at where their money is going. And so, focusing on the financial incentive of a subscription is kind of just making it sound like all you're getting as a benefit of a subscription is like the benefit is the discount, when in fact, the whole point of a subscription is the subscription should actually be a convenient mechanism for you to consume, right? And so I would, again, focus on ways beyond just price to inflate the value of the subscription, whether it's by layering on like a free digital product. But again, I would hesitate to, like some of the brands we work with, they don't even discount their subscription at all. Like there's one brand we're talking to right now who's actually considering removing it entirely, because the whole point is their product's great. Like, why would you need a discount to buy it? The whole point is that we're actually making it convenient for you to like not run out.
Yeah, that's a great point. So again, I'm talking with Ben Fisher at Rodeo at hey.rodeo. If you can't see the video, he's a Yankees fan, which means most people don't like him probably as it is. But Ben, let me ask you another question. I see that you have a boost revenue button on your thing, which is really creative. It's a great way to call it. I'm sure that you have an onboarding or at least meeting with people or a trial or something of sort that lets people understand. So if they came in to talk to you guys, tell me a little bit about the process where they're learning about it through you. Can they do a webinar? Is there, what do they do?
Yeah. So if you go and you click the boost revenue button, essentially it schedules a consultation call with me. And what we'll do is I'm not showing you the dog and pony show of the product necessarily. What we're focused on is understanding your business and where you're at. Specifically like understanding, like what are your quarterly goals? What are your end of the year goals? Like what's the size of your subscription program today relative to like your entire like book of business? And what are the things that you've been struggling with and what are you trying to accomplish? And from that, I can kind of give you my honest assessment of like, are we, can we be helpful? And in what ways can we be helpful? And so it's largely around brands that, they have a healthy business. They are looking for ways to increase repeat purchases. Both on the subscription side as well as in more, we'll call it like other creative ways, like on demand, where, all right, let's acknowledge that not everyone wants to subscribe, but there's still ways to create predictable or semi-predictable revenue, because a lot of people just aren't going to subscribe to your product. And actually, one question I didn't ask you, but I should have at the beginning of this is, do you have any physical subscriptions yourself?
Myself?
Yeah.
Do not think so for products at this point. It used to be for my wife was taking a certain kind of weight loss program, and she had to get these snack bars that she had on subscribe, but it became a problem. That's exactly what I was going back to. They piled up and then they were gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's like the funny piece of all this is like when you talk to people, and even when I talk to a lot of our like brands that are trying to push their subscription program, one of the first questions I ask them is how many subscriptions do you have? And several don't have any. Like I'd say by and large, the answer is like maybe one, like they have one product, two. And I think what's kind of funny is like, there's a little bit of and I get it, right? Like you are looking at your business and you're like, well, subscription revenue on average, people buy it at least 3 times. And the reason LTV is times 3 typically is you buy it once, you get one renewal, then you realize that you got too much of it. And then like, shit. And then you forget that you're still subscribed. And then that third time is when you cancel. That's why LTV oftentimes for subscription, that's not true for everyone. But, when brands are looking at like, oh, we need to get more and more subscribers. One thing I ask people to take a pause on is like, your goal is not a subscription. Your goal is to get people to have happy customers repeatedly buying. And subscriptions are a way to do that, but there's other creative ways that are now being developed. And I think if you look at your life and you're like, well, you don't have any subscriptions, yet you're basically trying to get all of your customers to subscribe. There's an insight there. And I think that I encourage every entrepreneur to kind of pay attention to that, because it's really easy to focus on just like what everyone else is doing, and kind of think from like first principles of like, what's the goal here? And what can I even learn from my own behavior to inform like some of the decisions I'm making within the business?
It's really amazing. I mean, this is fascinating to begin with, because while I talk to a lot of companies that have some subscribe and save and recurring revenue like that, it's not always structured where they focus on it this much. It's just really like, okay, we have this, which is great. You know, if anyone that's listening goes to hey.rodeo to see the site, obviously you're going to see some pictures. And Ben, I got to ask this question. You and Joel both have pictures with dogs in there. What's the story with that? Because your dog has the same expression you do in the picture. That's really funny.
That's so fun. I've heard that so many times. Yeah, that's Charlie. And she does. Like, people have said that we look very similar. Yeah, and that's Joel's dog, Shotzi. Yeah, so I guess it started off with me, because like every single photograph of me, even on LinkedIn, is me holding Charlie. And so just to be consistent, I think Joel and I were like, Joel, you need to hold a dog, otherwise. And luckily he had a dog to hold. He didn't borrow the dog. The dog is actually his.
There you go.
But I think part of it too is our personalities as well, that we try to inject in everything, which is, to have a little bit of fun. And although we're professionals, it's like, how do you make a tool that isn't necessarily on its face fun and interesting? How do you make it delightful? And how do you inject that into the personality of the business itself?
Yeah.
So
it's really
dogs help with that.
Because pets can be a great place to actually come to your business, because people are really regimented in what they do with their pets. So timing out subscribe stuff. Well, this has actually been an amazing conversation, Ben, but is there anything else you think that we didn't touch on that people out there would want to understand about Rodeo at hey.rodeo?
I mean, what I'd say that is two things. If you have an existing business that you just have not gone into subscription yet, I'm thinking specifically probably if you sell beauty or largely beauty is one of those places where people buy repeatedly, but they vary what they buy. And so a lot of beauty companies don't offer subscriptions, because they're like, well, people change what they're buying every single time they buy. I'd love to talk to and just like be like sort of I'd be like a whiteboard for you, and just to kind of talk through some of like what are you seeing in potential ways that like I could imagine you guys being able to drive repeat purchases. And I guess this is open for anyone, any of your listeners who are listening. Is like I guess as it came across, like I kind of nerd out on this stuff and I think about it a lot and I really enjoy it. So if there's any way that I can be helpful, just I guess click the boost revenue button,
Boost revenue, my favorite button.
Or get in touch with me through LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter. My username is skinny and bald, because I'm kind of skinny, kind of bald.
Is that A&D bald or
A&D? Yeah.
Okay.
I'm balder today.
I can't remember that.
Yeah.
I'll get that on my Twitter in like 10 minutes. That's all right. That looks like it's semi self-inflicted. It looks like you lost some, but then you took the rest and just sort of made it consistent.
In college, I got to that point where like that awkward middle part,
I understand that.
No, but if I can be of service and helpful to anyone, I'm happy to talk through. And again, the brands where I can be most helpful to, you already probably are doing at least $1.5 million a year in revenue. And the reason behind that is at that point, these brands are probably just trying to figure out how to grow faster, as opposed to figuring out, do they have a business in the first place?
It's really amazing, because you've done such an amazing job. This has really been a fascinating podcast, because even though I understood about subscribe and save, you really take it as under your wings. I mean, a lot of marketing agencies will go back and do a lot of things. They might even be able to say, well, you can do this. But the fact that you've compartmentalized one thing, and actually what's amazing is it's like you're going to enhance the people that are already buying from you. So you have a captured audience. It's not like you have to sell someone. They just have to get consistent and maybe even look at other products. So it's an incredible growth opportunity for both sides. I thank you for coming in today. It's been awesome. And all the listeners out there, again, if you want to reach out to Ben on Twitter, it was skinny and bald is his handle. That's awesome. I can't forget
It's
that.
also on LinkedIn. That's my handle on LinkedIn as well.
Or you can
write
find
in
him
Ben
on
Fisher.
LinkedIn. Right. And then at hey.rodeo is the site for Rodeo.
Yeah.
And Ben, man, thanks for being into the Quiet Light podcast today. We really appreciate you spending the time today.
Thanks so much for having me, Pat. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.